Greetings my dear students, and let me thank you at the onset for choosing to learn this topic, and I am sure that as we go through this journey for next 1 hour, we will make this very interesting and a good learning experience at the end of this particular session. Let me thank National Commission for Homeopathy and the Homeopathic Education Board for giving me this opportunity to interact with all of you. So, today we are going to discuss and understand creative thinking and its relationship to personal growth. This is a statement that I want all of us to remember. The comfort zone is the great enemy of creativity. So, I think the next 30-40 minutes you are going to see how we will step out of this comfort zones and understand people who did that in their life and became extremely creative and useful to the society. So, our agenda would be to understand what is creative thinking, to understand the relationship between creativity and personal growth, variations in society and its effect on creativity, difference in the creative patterns, educational creativity, what it is, educational approach to accommodate creativity in the program, how to create efficient creative spaces around ourselves, homeopathy and its relationship with creativity, and finally the alchemy of creativity. So, what is creativity? Let us understand what creativity is all about. It is our ability to look at a problem and come up with a good solution to solve it. This is in general an understanding of creativity and its creative thinking. Once we understand the problem, it has nothing to do with the subject matter, the job, the issue or the question that we are studying with. It is all about how we actually understand a particular issue, problem or a question and try and find a sustainable solution to that particular issue. There are creative people as inventors, there are creative teachers, there are artists who are creative, even the cleaners who clean our day-to-day mundane properties are extremely creative sometimes if you observe them. Good creative people often just connect different ideas in a beautiful new way and make them commercially, socially and scientifically viable. Let us understand what I am trying to say here with the help of a case study. So, I will give you a background of this case. This is more from a social perspective. So, there are 3/4 of our Indian population live in 6 lakh villages with a varying population between 800 to 5,000 inhabitants in each village. So, you can see there is a large variation between the population itself in the villages. In absolute numbers, the rural population is increasing. Close to 40% of our rural folks live below poverty line, 10% are challenged with disabilities and special needs, and 50% of the population is illiterate and at least 50% do not have access to clean drinking water, schools, primary healthcare facilities and all weather roads. Now, these numbers are true more say 10 years before. Now, they might have changed, but I am trying to give you a case study where you can understand how creative thinking can solve a problem. Above numbers clearly tell the story of entanglement in poverty cycle and a deprivation trap due to inequitable distribution of resources leading to inability to cope with basic needs of life, which in turn impacts the productivity, health and education. So, first what we do is understand the need to solve this particular problem as to why we should be solving this particular problem. Now, basic transport is required for local movement, essential to cover very elementary needs of rural life like transport of water, transport of firewood, visits to market to buy groceries, access to healthcare centers and timely commute to school and business. Non-availability of transport causes loss of mobility and it isolates the people. Poor access in rural areas propagate the deprivation trap by denying the communities access to their basic needs, isolating them, making them feel powerless, vulnerable and get trapped in the poverty and feel physically and emotionally weak and deprived. Isolation due to poor access slows down the economic activity as well and creates impediments for dissemination of new technologies, techniques, and increasing the marketing and production cost by limiting access of the consumer as well as the labor. So, you can see that by not having a basic transport in a rural area, how much is the impact? It impacts every sector of our life, it impacts every domain of our life. According to the National Transport Policy Committee, fair weather roads, what are fair weather roads? Roads which are useful only when in a non-rainy season, connect only up to 55% of villages. In order to cover all villages, all weather roads, an investment required may be in an order of 30,000 crores, which is beyond the scope of existing priorities of the government for investment. And it is not just about 30,000 crores, but it is also about the time and effort required to cover this entire distance. Passenger transport is mainly by bicycles and motorized vans in fair weather roads, and buses and various sizes and capacities are used only in all weather roads. Three-wheelers, scooters, motorcycles handle a small part of the transport. Since fair weather road is current reality and likely to stay so, a non-motorized transport, that is called NMT, essentially cycles, become the cheapest and the reliable modes of transport across all age groups irrespective of the gender. Where there is no motorable road, animal driven carts and cycles play a very important role in freight movement and personal movement as well. Although the variations from village to village and country to country be enormous, it is clear from the research to date that burden on women is lower when there is a widespread use of appropriate transport modes. What it means is, where there is no transport or inappropriate transport modes, the burden on women for their day-to-day activity increases. A woman benefits from use of a non-motorized transport indirectly due to transfer of responsibility of household tasks from women to men. This is particularly a case for travel to grinding meals, water and firewood. Traditionally, women's role in rural setting are numerous and varied, like food preparation, child care, crop production, marketing for groceries, drawing and storing water, cleaning of clothes, collection of firewood and care for their infants. So, you can see that women become more vulnerable and they are impacted hugely when the transport facilities are limited. Most of the time women have multitude of tasks and that must be completed often at the same time. So, women have to multitask. It is clear that because most women are unable to multitask single handedly, young girls who usually are the daughters and the sisters, younger sisters, are forced to forego their education in order to help in the household task. So, you see a issue of transport goes deep down not just for one generation, but to the next generation as well. Multitasking requires that women retain flexibility of timings, which may be supported by use of a single non-motorized transport. It also impacts health. Heavy workload can take its toll on health of a woman in rural areas. The actual process of carrying heavy loads can cause headaches, backache, pain in the neck, and more seriously spine can be deformed or there could be osteoarthritis of knee, etc. Accidents while carrying this can also cause problems of spine injury and slip disc, injury to children while they are being carried, broken backs, etc. Appropriate use of NMT hence can help reduce not only the workload, but also the disease burden in a working woman in rural areas. And mind you, the definition of working woman is more applied in rural areas than in the urban areas where there are multiple help at hand for a woman to take care of her day-to-day work. According to UNICEF, the school dropout scenarios in the country is extremely high. Over 80 million children are not completing their full cycle of elementary education. In addition, 8 million are out of school for over next few years. School dropout is much higher in rural areas and in girls. There are a number of reasons for dropping out of school, ranging from lack of interest, lack of access to school, lack of facilities in school, non-availability of educational material, poor standards of education, gender bias, etc. But most important, one major reason is non-availability of transport, leading to long hours of commute and hence not able to balance the educational requirement as well as the familial requirement. Long hours and difficulties of commuting compounds the lack of interest along with loss of hours that can be dedicated to the household and field works, which is a reality of today's life. The studies conducted by IIM Bangalore shows that percentage of passenger traffic in different modes in respect to settlement, which are less than 500 to over 5,000. The study shows that more than 60% of passenger trips are by walking, bicycle and bus, mainly for agricultural operations, education, business, and this is irrespective of the size of the settlement, whether you live in a very small village or a relatively big size village. The only solution to remove poverty is to create employment, which can be done by increased access to by the roads and the means of transport. If proper roads and means of transport are provided, it will act as a catalyst for accelerating the rural development and bringing about a social equity. Efficient transport can help people take advantage of massive investments envisaged in rural areas from private as well as public sector. So, this slide tells you about how many people use walking as their main transport method, cycling and use the buses and some other transport, the private transport methods. So, you can see the majority is dependent on either the bicycles or a walk, and for a walking person, if you provide with a bicycle, it will do wonders because it will save time and effort as well. So, once this problem was understood from health perspective, from economic perspective, from a social perspective, from an educational perspective, from a gender perspective, and once we wanted to have an equitable solution which could be offered to everybody, which could be cost effective, viable and sustainable, I think the intervention that was suggested for above assessment was introducing NMT, and it is likely that the intervention will impact at multiple levels to improve the quality of women, children and men in rural areas. So, this recycle, if you can understand, is nothing but a very simple intervention where we are connecting 3 dots to give a sustainable and a viable solution which will have impact at multiple levels in our rural society. So, what is this? You can see this bicycle donation drive where used cycles lie in abandoned housing societies are recovered, and then you can see in this slide that they are revamped and refurbished. So, they are made from an unusable cycle into a usable cycle, and then you see the government comes into play and they build cycle tracks, or they can use cycling tracks to use these particular cycles not only in the rural areas, but in the urban areas as well. And there we offer a particular solution where we recover a cycle which is not usable, lying in the garage or lying in the basement of some urban housing society. We take it free of cost, we revamp it, refurbish it, make it absolutely viable and usable, and then redistribute it. The key point is to redistribute the cycle to the person who requires it most. So, you see there are 3 RE, recycle has 3 components: recover a cycle, refurbish it and redistribute it. So, essentially you see the problem looks very big when we look about using not having a appropriate transport mode, and it has impact at multiple levels: personal, gender wise, educational, health, economic and other activities as well. But you can see when you use this particular simple method of recovering, restoring the cycle and redistributing it, it helps you solve a lot of major problems. So, you see basically in this particular case, to solve such a huge and humongous problem, only 3 dots had to be connected. Dot 1 of discovering and recovering a cycle, dot 2 restoring it back to make it more viable, and then it redistributes it to the person who needs it most. So, here now you will be able to understand through this case study that it was all about thinking in a different way to solve a problem in the simplest possible way, in the most economical way, and to connect those dots to make an impact at multiple levels in the society. Now, this is not the only example, this is just one example that we are using to exemplify how creative thinking could be impactful. So, what is creative thinking? It can be termed as an innovative thinking, it can be termed as thinking for solving a problem, it could also be termed as critical analysis and critical thinking, or as it is now said, thinking out of box or out of an unorthodox box. So, it is essentially an unconventional way of thinking. Let us go into a little bit about what are the types of analysis of thinking itself. So, there are two types of thinkers mostly. There are adaptive thinkers and there are innovative thinkers, and mind you, both are very, very essential for the composition of a society. So, adaptive thinkers essentially improvise, they work within the set norms and they focused on detailing and making the system more efficient. For example, anybody involved in day to day operations of, let us say, a hospital. So, he works within the set norms of the hospital, but to improve the turnaround time of a patient, to make sure that the quality of health care is delivered well, he would be focusing on day to day systems, on and detailing of each system to make sure that everybody who is a part of that system, be it a person, be it technology, be it any other stakeholder, contributes their best in a systematic way to give the best possible outcome to the user. So, this could be a simple example of what an adaptive thinker can do. He becomes a very important person because he is trying to make a system work more efficiently. Now, there are other thinkers which we are talking about as innovative thinkers. Now, innovative thinkers usually think out of norms, they do not think essentially within the system, but they can also think outside the system. They can think about completely new ideas, they can handle multiple ideas at one given point of time, and but usually would not be going into details of it, but would like to keep it at a very broad spectrum ideas which will be then used for creating a detailed plan. So, you see there are two levels and two types of thinking. One, as I said, the adaptive thinking, which is more conventional, more linear and more sequential, and the innovative thinking, which is a bit out of norm, mostly broad and multiple ideas coming from a completely new perspective. There is also what we call as convergent thinking and divergent thinking, which runs more or less on the parallel lines. So, divergent thinking is a type of thinking that is focused on generating a wide range of ideas, possibilities and solutions. It is an exploratory process that involves brainstorming, mind mapping and other creative techniques to generate as many ideas as possible. So, the focus is to generate as many ideas as possible. In a divergent thinking, the goal is to think outside the box, outside the norms and come up with an unconventional solution that may not have been considered before so far. This type of thinking is essentially useful in creative fields such as advertising, designs, innovations, where coming up with new and original ideas is very, very critical. Now, compare that with the convergent thinking. It is a type of thinking that is focused on finding the best solution. The divergent thinking deals with possibilities and convergent thinking deals with finding the one best solution or an answer to a problem. This is more analytical process that involves evaluating different ideas, different possibilities, selecting the most promising ideas based on the data or the range of options. In convergent thinking, the goal is always to narrow down, not to spread, but to narrow down the possibilities to find the best possible solution. This type of thinking is often used in fields such as science, engineering and mathematics, where there are clear right and wrong answers, and the idea is to select the best possible applicable answer for a given problem or a given question. So, as you can see, these are two different types of thinking processes, the divergent and the convergent one, and we will try and understand what are the differences between them. Convergent thinking is more likely to result in the single best solution to an answer or problem. This type of thinking is more focused and it is done to improve the efficiency of any process, but it will not allow for same level of creativity and exploration as in divergent thinking. It is more disciplined to come and arrive at a more efficient answer amongst the many that are on the table. Both divergent thinking and convergent thinking have their own strengths and weaknesses, but they can be used in different situations depending on the nature of the problem or the task at the hand. Divergent thinking is more exploratory, it is more open ended, it is more free flowing of ideas, and convergent thinking is more analytical, more focused and more logical. Now, you can understand that everybody will not have all the characteristics or an attribute for us to be proficient in both types of thinkings, but nevertheless with education, with practice, one can become reasonably proficient in using both the divergent and convergent thinking processes to solve a problem. Now, there is a third type of thinking that I am talking about, which is even more useful, and that is called as lateral thinking. So, lateral thinking was first coined by Edward de Bono, a physician, in his book The Use of Lateral Thinking way back in 1967. He believed that traditional or vertical thinking, which involves analyzing information, generating solutions based on logical and linear steps, often resulted in limited or narrow solutions to problems. In contrast, lateral thinking emphasizes generating as many ideas as possible and then selecting the most promising or the most effective one. So, you see, it is a combination of convergent and divergent process. Lateral thinking can be useful in variety of contexts such as business, science, education, and even to solve personal problems. It can help individuals overcome mental blocks, generate new ideas and approach problem in a more creative or an innovative way. Overall, lateral thinking is a valuable problem solving technique that encourages individuals to approach problems and situations in different ways or from a different perspective. By challenging the assumptions, most important thing is to challenge the basic assumption, generating different alternatives by challenging the assumptions and focusing on possibilities. An individual can come with a new innovative solution that may not have been considered using traditional or the vertical modes of thinking. I think the key point here is to be able to understand what is the core assumption in a problem and to challenge that assumption or to turn it around head over heels and check what other ways can be looked about to solve this particular problem. That is the issue. Now, I will share one good case study over here. So, from a healthcare perspective itself, if you could see that there were a lot of iatrogenic morbidities or morbidity to the patients or mortality to the patients caused by what I would say errors during the treatment, mainly during surgical procedures and during major surgeries. Now, some of these errors were completely avoidable and it could save a person from additional pain, additional loss of functionality, a longer stay in a hospital, and also reduce his or her emotional and economic burden. Now, this was an issue that was faced by the healthcare industry. So, the error rate was significantly more than what people had, what other industries have. So, there was this surgeon by the name Dr. Atul Gawande, who is a practicing surgeon in United States. He came up with an idea by looking at other industries and he saw that the error rate in airline industry, which is also a combination of machine and man, was much less than the error rate in healthcare industry. So, he thought, let me learn from what the airline industry is doing better than the healthcare industry. Now, imagine if airline industry also had a higher rate of errors, we could have seen much more loss of life, much more loss of property, and people would have lost trust into flying. And this would have impacted not only the social structure of our communication and ability to travel, but it would have impacted the economic structure as well. Now, imagine all this getting blocked. So, the healthcare industry professional wanted to check on what good the airline professionals are doing. And you know what came out? That airline professionals use something called pre-flight checklist. So, every minute detail is mentioned in that checklist, and the flight personnel or the pilots or any other operators who are assisting the pilots have to make sure that every point on the checklist is checked, rechecked, verified and cleared before the flight even leaves the ground. Now, what can we learn from it? And this is a solution, this is an idea that Dr. Atul Gawande in his book called Checklist Manifesto has shared, and he experimented, he being surgeon, he experimented with his own practice and found that there was a remarkable difference in the approach and hence the error rate that could otherwise happen in a operating theatre space. He also thought that it was not necessary for a surgeon to necessarily be in charge of the operation theatre, and someone else like a marshal could be in charge of the operation theatre, and the surgeon could focus on more critical aspects of doing the surgery and handling the tissue rather than focusing on the entire operating theatre and its systems. Now, this was something not conventionally done, because in an operating theatre, surgeon is supposed to be the most, he is supposed to be the commander. But here was somebody who was ready to say that let some marshal handle the operating, other thing other than the critical steps in operations. The rest of the things could be managed and handled by someone else. And there would be a call out as to how the steps would be done before the surgery starts. So, everybody who is involved in the operation theatre other than the surgeon would know exactly what steps would be done, and hence everybody would hence know what role to play and how they would contribute to the surgery. Now, this has definitely brought down the error rates much more proficiently, and now the operation theatres and the healthcare has become much safer than what it was a few years ago. Thanks to this lateral thinking and innovative way of learning from other industries, we could make the lives of our patients more safer, give them lesser pain because of our treatment modalities, reduce the length of stay in the hospital, reduce the emotional stress, and also bring down the economic cost of treatment. Now, with this example, I think it is not very difficult to understand how these thinking processes work. So, in a lateral thinking, it is important to challenge the assumption. Like in this case, the surgeon was not necessarily the the head of the or the commander of the operating theatre. It could be someone else. It could be some marshal who could be doing that job. Now, there was a conventional assumption that surgeon is in charge, but it was not necessarily so. Hence, the error rates came down. So, there was a basic assumption which was conventionally practiced for decades and years together, had to be challenged and looked upon differently. We had to look at generating different alternatives, different ideas, rather than setting the first and the most obvious one, right. The first and the most obvious one did not necessarily be the best one. Then focusing on different possibilities. So, you got to have the tenacity to focus on each possibility rather than adapting to just what is believed now. Rather than just following conformity, it is better to challenge and look for other possibilities with equal prudence as well. Then you could also do a bit of combining, the combo as you nowadays call. You can also do a bit of combine and mix and match to understand what are the different possibilities that emerge out of combinations that we could do, and it could bring about a novel solution. And then what we is traditionally known is understand the patterns or the connections between two unrelated dots, and see if by connecting those two dots, if some problem can be solved with a new insight. So, challenging the assumption, generating alternatives, focusing on new possibilities, making combination of ideas, and then looking for some patterns where dots can be connected or patterns can be reallocated, and to see if a new solution can be seen as a answer to the problem. A lot of thinking techniques are used, like brainstorming, right, where multiple people sit and throw ideas into the idea well. There are pressure cooker exercises where you get 3 minutes, 5 minutes to really think the ideas as spontaneously and as fast as possible and note them down. There is a reverse thinking area where you look at the problem and start understanding from the solution to where the problem leads to. There is something called a brain writing with a 365 rule. There is something called as brain drawing, analogy generation, role playing, where different people play different roles as stakeholders and come up with their own perspective, and then see things together to make sure if the solution looks good from all sides. There are storyboards, there are thinking hats where one person thinks differently wearing each hat, and one from a way of a technical hat, one could be a financial hat, the other one could be a healthcare hat, and then you think differently wearing each hat at each time and note down your observations, and then finally what we call as mind mapping. So, we are not here to discuss these techniques in detail, but I want you to understand that there are multiple techniques, scientific techniques that are used to do creative thinking and analytical thinking. Well, these are some of the creative thinkers that nobody can miss: Thomas Edison, Walt Disney, Albert Einstein, Newton, Steve Jobs, Leonardo da Vinci, and Marie Curie. Now, look at what their wisdom was after they have gone through the process. Thomas Edison mentions that I have not failed, I just found 10,000 ways that won't work to discover that one way that will give you the best result. What does it tell us? That failing is okay. If somebody says failing is not an option, that's untrue. Failing is a routine part of life. We all fail, and it's okay to fail, but it's not okay to give up, and you persist till you find that one solution that will give you the best outcome. Walt Disney talks about engaging with the impossible, right? He says it's kind of a fun to do impossible things. I think it gives you a sense of enjoying the process of doing the challenge or accepting the challenge and trying to do the impossible work. Whereas Newton is very humble, and he says that I am standing on the shoulders of giants, and hence I can see further. So, he is paying his tributes to people who discovered something before him, based on whose knowledge and wisdom he could discover the further things standing on their shoulders. It is very important what Dr. Marie Curie says. It is be less curious about people, but be more curious and inquisitive about ideas. So, ideas is something that excites this wonderful inventor. And what Albert Einstein focuses on is imagination. He says logic has importance in life, but it will only take you from point A to point B. whereas imagination will take you everywhere and anywhere which you can even you may not have even imagined where an imagination can take you. So, that is the power of imagination. Steve Jobs talks about really seeing the whole picture as a whole, as we call as systems thinking, and then connecting the dots to achieve what is one great solution. And Leonardo da Vinci is talking about the approach to learning, and he says as long as you are learning and the process is on, it will not exhaust you. So, you can see all these greats, what they have learnt out of their what they have learnt out of the process is very distilled wisdom, right. It is okay to fail, it is fun to engage with impossible, imagination has power more than logic if applied well. It is important to be curious about your ideas and not just give them up. It is important to be humble because someone else generated knowledge before you and you are using that knowledge to take it further, and more important, it is never exhausting to keep learning, and that is, I think these are some great pearls of wisdom that we can understand from these creative thinkers. Now, there are two constructs of creative motivation. What motivates these people? There are two constructs of creative motivation. One is called deficiency creativity and other being actual creative. Now, deficiency creativity is motivated by need for acceptance and love and can help individuals turn a deprived environment into a nurturing one. I am giving you one example from contemporary life. Manoj Sharma, who is an IPS officer batch 2005, overcame all the hardships and now is finally serving his loyalty to the nation. I think we all know about his story, and if you haven't heard about him, you may please be able to go on the net and find out about him, the type of hardships he came and the type of deprived environment that he came to be what he is today. So, that is what I am saying. You start in a deficient environment, in a deprived environment, but you have the drive and you have the means and the methods within yourself to rise and become what you are today. And being actual creative, which is motivated by a higher level of growth need or what we call as self actualization, and may bring a very transcendental satisfaction in this particular way. Let me give you this example of this great individual, Dr. Prakash Baba Amte and his wife Dr. Mandakini, whose ICMR Lifetime Achievement Award by Bill Gates Foundation. And I think they are the ones who in a very remote place have kept the humanity alive, not only to the human beings, but they have been extremely kind and taking care of the animals, wild as well as the domesticated, and they live an extremely simple, down to earth, within the nature, and a very pious kind of a life, which is very, very simple, taking care of the community, taking care of the environment, taking care of the people and the fauna and the flora and the animals around. This is a wholesome living, which is very, very simple, very difficult for many of us to even imagine doing this in today's world. But this kind of a creativity gives you that the very sense of purpose and the self actualization which every human being is striving to achieve. So, let us have a look at some other examples as well. Neeraj Chopra, I think everybody knows, very proud, we were very proud of him having won the gold medal in Olympics as well as the World Championship. Born in Panipat in a family that was involved in agriculture, so there was no precedence to his sport, nobody was a sportsman. He was riddled with obesity, and can you imagine somebody riddled with obesity getting into gym, getting himself into a fit shape, and then not only getting into a fit shape, but kind of excelling at the international level to be one of the top athletes of the world. What we can see here is how he came from a humble background, was riddled with a health issue, and he did exact opposite through his hard work and through his focus and dedication to bring about glory not only to himself, but also to our nation. Late Mr. Irfan Khan, a renowned actor in Indian industry, British and American cinema as well. Came from a very middle class background, no godfathers in film industry, not so typical good looking boy who would be needed for Indian screens, but he broke all the stereotypes just by his talent and self belief. Unfortunately for us, we will not see him in further films because he is no more with us, and that is a big loss, but he has made his mark on the film industry and also for people who would be inspired by the way he broke the stereotype, only focusing on his talent and self belief. Sir Ratan Tata ji, a former chairman of Tata Sons, being an industrialist and philanthropist at its best, I can tell you nobody has achieved this kind of balance of bringing in investment and then connecting them with social reforms on one single platform. He is an epitome of how to nurture businesses and then connect them to the society for all of us to grow together. Sudha Murthy ji, an educator, author, philanthropist, I think she again broke all the social norms by being a very early engineer and somebody who was talented, somebody who was bright in education and somebody who was breaking the norms, because at her times when she became engineer, engineering was a male dominated educational field, which I am sure it is not now, but back then it was a male dominated scenario, and she stood tall amongst all the male contemporaries and kind of was a bright student and did well not only in engineering but all the fields that she touched. I think it is her sincerity, simplicity and sense of purpose with which she works that gives us this particular wonderful great individual in our India today. Sheetal Devi is an Arjuna award winner. She is a para archer and she suffers from what is called as phocomelia. So she has, there is deficiency in the hands, and can you imagine somebody coming from that level, overcoming the entire health issues and becoming a champion in archery, where stability, balance and hands are the most crucial element of the sport. Superb achievement from these hardworking, dedicated and driven people to inspire all of us to overcome our own inabilities and our own blocks. Ramesh Babu, I think he has been in the names recently, comes from a very humble family, but what is more important is his focus, his humbleness and his consistency at that age. It is very difficult for a teenager who is just entering into from a pre-teens to teens to be highly focused, because it goes very against the nature of being a teenager. He is highly consistent and at the same time very, very humble. So you can see that there are different characteristics of these successful, wonderful people from Indian scenario. Rishabh Shetty, the Kantara fame, director and the national award winner, through his films brought creativity and culture together, connecting the audience. Why the film probably did well commercially as well as did well from a critical perspective is because it appealed to the audience, because he connected them to the roots. Now that is a very critical way of presenting a particular story. His Holiness Shivananda Babaji, a Padma Shri award winner and a Yoga Ratna award. If you can understand the early part of his life story, you would probably understand that he lost his parents and his siblings when he was not even 10 years old, and since then he has been living with his gurus, meditating, discovering self, spreading spirituality, practicing spirituality and bringing peace and contentment to the life of many. He has had a journey which many of us wouldn't even dream of. Very peaceful, very contented, indifferent to the requirements of day-to-day life and unbothered about any sort of pressure from external society. And here is an opposite, the Robert Downey Jr. He is an actor, an Academy Award winner, a Golden Globe winner. Due to personal problems and setbacks, went into a bad phase, got addicted to drugs, but came out of this haunting experience and has now kind of excelled in the field of performing arts and acting. Why I am sharing this particular slide with you or a story with you is, it's never too late to get back. Everybody makes errors, everybody has problems, and you might get into a phase where the life is not good with you, but it's never late to get back and bounce back. And Steve Jobs, I think everybody knows, the co-founder of Apple, and the wonderful product he has gifted to the world. And mind you, his life was also not very smooth or a cakewalk, as we say. He had a roller coaster life, financial difficulties, nobody was ready to believe in him, and then he had to sell off his company and the product, and then he bounced back into creating some wonderful products that are now ruling the the mobility devices all over the world. And I would like to touch upon this gentleman, Dr. K.G. Saxena, who from a homeopathic field has done a wonderful job of getting homeopathy into mainstream by formulating the mandates and the rules, regulations and the of governing homeopathic education, homeopathic practice and homeopathic research. So, when you look at all these examples, you will see some from spiritual field, some from administrative field, some from field of art, some from field of engineering, some from social field, some from spirituality, some who are at the fag end of their life, some who are as early as teenagers. So, you can see that you can be creative and you can have creative thinking at all phases of your life. So, who can be creative? If that is a question, then the answer is all of us. You could be a painter, you could be an artist, you could come from a deprived society, you could be a chef, you could be an engineer, you could be a president of a nation. Everybody can be creative in their own roles. Even a homemaker can be very, very creative, and I have seen mothers and sisters, all of us, being extremely creative in managing their roles and managing their families. So, what differentiates us? Our cognitive abilities, our flexibility in thinking or the general approach to a problem in terms of the flexibility, our personal motivational factors, how we handle our emotions, how much are we willing to take risk in life, and how much do we want to perceive the perseverance of life. So, this is the overall difference between people who think creatively and do creative work in whichever field of life they are, and the people who ordinarily resort to what we call as conformity of the society. Does variation in society affect creativity? The answer is yes. The educational standards, the political scenario, the socio-cultural background, the regional variations and human relationships, all of them impact creativity and the creative abilities of people and their creative thinking methods. Creativity is also constantly in a change mode. It changes with time, with evolution of human beings and the environment that we live in. These also include cultural and personal barriers that can inhibit the creativity abilities. So, it has an external component as well, and we accept and we understand that. But these differences in socio-cultural environment should be observed minutely and sensitively to understand creativity. So, a creativity of a child in an African nation would be different from a creativity of a child who is coming from what we call a well developed nation. A creativity of an engineer in an Indian scenario would be different from a creativity of an engineer who comes from say a less developed country or who comes from an extremely well developed country. Well, we all understand that, but the basic thread, the basic process remains the same. This will help us. If we are sensitive to understand this, we will be producing more better human beings in the upcoming time, which are more productive, more rational in their thinking, and most important, more inclusive, to include everybody in their thought process and in their process. So, what are the characteristics of a creative person? Most of them are very open minded and they communicate well. They can communicate or articulate their ideas clearly. They are well read, they are knowledgeable, and hence they are also flexible. They are not insecure to go away, let go of their ideas and adapt to newer ideas. And most important, they are ready to take the risk, whether it is a financial risk, whether it is a socio-economic risk, whether it is a cultural risk. They identify the risk and they are ready to challenge and take the risk for betterment of self and for betterment of the society. Most of them, as we saw in the examples, overcome hardships. They are unaffected by opinion of others. As you can see that Sudha Murthy ji could defy the gender bias in education at the time when she was becoming an engineer. I am sure she must have faced opinions of others which were not very favorable. They have a consistency and discipline, as you can see in the young chess champion. At that age, to defy his own age as a teenager and to perform consistently, be focused and disciplined, is going against the very nature of being teenager. They are very goal oriented, they are ready to break the preconceived notions, they are confident and they know their self-worth. They believe in humanity, simplicity and genuinity. And more important, they have a very strong will and they are emotionally very, very intelligent. They are not just intellectuals, but they are emotionally very, very intelligent to understand the sensitivity and accommodate the various perspectives that come their way. So, what are the benefits of being creative? It builds your self-confidence, it brings about a problem solving ability and which could be useful to you in your personal as well as your professional or your social areas. Once you are a confident person and once you have this ability to solve problems, I think you automatically get success. In the success brings in the respect. You have the ability to make a difference to self as well as to others, and you start being an innovator, where you are ready to look at different ideas and challenge the assumptions and think more cognitively to understand the problem and bring about, include the emotionality of and sensitivity of the factors and bring about a solution. So, creativity is not only materialistic, but it also involves human relationship. It requires personal integrity, a very sharp perception of the environment around you and the problem, subtle sensitivities and a lot of humbleness. Social creativity is a requisite substance to be explored in the society, and that I believe the younger generation should do. So, what is the relationship between creativity and personal growth? Let us unfold this from a personal growth perspective. Let us take this model of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. As you can see, there are 5 types of needs that he defines: physiological needs, safety needs, need for love and belonging, need for self-esteem, and then finally the self-actualization phase. To have a better understanding of human mind and needs, Maslow's proposed that human needs can be organized into hierarchies. This hierarchy ranges from a concrete needs such as need for having food and water to the abstract concepts such as self-actualization. According to Maslow, when a lower need is met, the next need on the hierarchy becomes our focus or our attention. He includes 5 categories as we spoke about in the previous slide: physiological, safety, love, self-esteem and self-actualization. Physiological needs refer to basic physical needs like drinking drinking when thirsty, eating when hungry. According to Maslow, these are the most essential needs of our life for survival, and some of these needs involve our efforts to meet the body's need for homeostasis. Safety needs: once people's physiological requirements are met, the next need arises is of safe environment. Our safety needs are apparent even early in the childhood to us as adults living in emergencies as well as adults living in emergencies in wars and disasters. These needs can also explain why we do things like purchase an insurance or contributes to our saving account. So, basically every individual wherever he is in this world wants to protect his life, life of his family, life of his loved being and life of people around him. So, everybody tries to gain some safety or a fallback mechanism or a safety net to feel secured and fulfill the need. That once safety and security is achieved, the next need in the hierarchy is to be feeling loved and accepted in the society. This need includes both romantic relationships, family generation, forming families, growing your families, having ties with friends, inclusion in social groups, inclusion in professional groups, certain amount of inclusion in a certain sect of society, and all this gives a feeling of being belonging and loved and accepted. The opposite of that would be being alienated, being lonely and isolated. So, it is important that we are loved and we belong to a certain society to feel secured. And then comes our esteem. The needs to involve the desire to feel good about ourselves, to feel confident about ourselves, to feel respected about ourselves. The second component involves the feeling valued by others. The first part is feeling confident about your own self. The second component is not only that you feel good about yourself, but you are also valued by others in family, your loved ones, your society. They value your achievement and your contribution, and they recognize you for something as a person in your family, in your society. And then the last but the most important thing refers a feeling of being fulfilled, feeling that we are living up to our potential, that we are living with a certain purpose and we are trying to fulfill that particular purpose and our potential of being for which we are born. One unique feature of self-actualization is that it looks different for everyone. Our physiological needs could be same, our needs for safety could be similar, our needs for love and affection can be comparable, right? Our needs for esteem could be different, but yet the platform is very similar. But the self-actualization is a very divergent expression. Essentially, self-actualization means feeling that we are doing what we believe in and what we are meant to do, setting up our purpose and then trying to achieve our purpose to fulfill our potentials. A little deeper into self-actualization. A new research links self-actualization to optimal creativity, where when you are in the process of self-actualization, you will discover yourself to be more and more creative, you will find yourself being more and more well and more well-being will be experienced, and you will experience the self-transcendency. A self-actualized person is self-motivated from within and does not need external motivation. He calls upon his own internal resources, his strength in any situation. Despite the mounting peer pressure, by being rooted in one's own beliefs, he can choose another way and not come under peer pressure or conformity. Remember that we all are human beings and we are all in a continuous process of self-evolution. Hence, don't compare yourself with anyone else. You are different and you are unique, right down to your own fingerprint. Has homeopathy got anything to do with self actualization? The answer is yes. In the 5th edition of Organon, Hahnemann talks about an unprejudiced observer who is well aware of the futility of transcendental speculations. He develops the art of observation to the core, where he is able to see what his patient is expressing to him and his relatives or the observers around the patient are expressing to him as is and not colored with his own personal biases. Now, this is something that does not come very naturally. It is something that a homeopathic mind or a person engaged in homeopathic treatment or a homeopathic physician should cultivate over a period of time. Because the job of homeopathic physician is to finally create a conceivable portrait of disease and not engage into some kind of speculations. And mind you, it is difficult to see things, feel them as they are expressed and see them as they are. Our personal biases, our observational faults, our non-observations and our mal-observations, which are often deeply connected with our personal being, our emotions, our vulnerabilities, our sensitivities, often distort the picture and does not allow us or do not allow us to see the portrait of disease as it is, but rather it gets colored with our own biases and prejudices. So, it is an important process for a homeopathic student or a student engaged in with homeopathy to be able to take this personal journey, which is inward, and go through the process, which is very closely linked to how the creativity and creative thinkers go through. When can a physician be unprejudiced? When he is self-aware, that is, when there is awareness of personal emotions, intellect, behavior and vulnerabilities. I am talking of awareness. To the next level, being conscious about self, journey of awareness to consciousness is it's a journey by itself, where which involves understanding of personal patterns of behavior in terms of what is the behavior, why am I behaving the same way, when do I behave in a certain way and how do I do that. Then comes the ability to discriminate the personal prejudice from reality and the facts that are present in our life. The self discovering process, that is enlightening self with personal strengths, abilities, weaknesses and vulnerabilities. That is when you discover self and you understand that these are my strengths, these are my abilities, these are the weaknesses in me and these are my vulnerabilities, which will make me fall prey to a certain situations. More important is to not only to discover self, but also accept self as is. We all know nobody is perfect. So, you might see you see yourself as a person whom you may not necessarily like or agree with, but yet for us to change or bring about a change, the first step is to accept ourselves with all our strengths, abilities, weaknesses, vulnerabilities, our behaviors, our emotions and our intellectual abilities. Once you accept, slowly the sense of purpose starts getting instilled into you and you start bringing about a change in yourself with the sense of purpose. And then from within you, you start extending yourself into the society to actualize the self potential or to understand with the sense of purpose what you meant to be doing and why you should be doing that, and then start enjoying the entire potential of yours and working towards discovering yourself more deeper, to actualize your self potential and to achieve what you ought to be achieving in your life, which is not necessarily always material things, but also things by which you can extend yourself beyond yourself to the society and make yourself more useful to your community, to your society, and to your nation as well. These qualities will make him listen, and once you are into that zone, it makes you a better listener. You are able to observe your own thoughts, and hence you are able to listen without having any bias or any judgments that may hamper your conception of portrait of disease, and hence the treatment process in homeopathy. So, now you can understand how deep is this issue and how important is this issue for a budding homeopathic doctor like you. We are talking about the other sentence which is there, it is called the higher purpose of life. In aphorism number 9 in Organon of Medicine, in the healthy condition of man, the spiritual vital force, the dynamis that animates the material body, rules with unbounded sway and retains all the parts of organism in admirable, harmonious, vital operations as regards both sensations and functions, so that, mind you, so that the reason gifted mind can freely employ this living healthy instrument. Living healthy instrument implies the living being, as is the mind and his body, for higher purposes of our existence. Now, you can draw parallels between understanding, being self aware, and wanting to achieve your potential and actualize your existence of life. So, you see, these deeper aspects are very important, and these are not just applicable to the patients, but they are more applicable to the doctor or the physician or a homeopathic physician as well. And I would say that on a scale of 1 to 10, I would say 7 out of 10 times they are more applicable to a homeopathic physician, because only and only if he is free and his mind can be used, reason gifted mind can be used for betterment of his own patients and for higher purposes of his existence, will he enjoy being a physician and will he enjoy being a homeopathic healer. And that is why this becomes a very important topic for all of us to understand and be aware of. The higher purpose is of course more than just accomplishing any dream or any kind of materialistic success. It is a genuine quality of a person that has combination of being visionary and also going beyond our personal needs and motives for upliftment of society as a whole. Now, I am trying to give you a parallel between how, as a homeopathic physician, you discover yourself from being unaware to aware, getting conscious of your own abilities, accepting your own self as you are, then defining or gradually emerging out into the purpose of your self purpose of your life, and then extending yourself into a self actualization mode where you really enjoy challenging and exploring your potential and helping not only yourself, but helping the society around you. Now, you look at the Maslow's hierarchy needs and you will see physiological needs are taken care of mostly by our parents, and safety needs are taken care of mostly by us and our family. Love and belonging starts with our family, with our loved beings, and extends to the society. Esteems have two aspects. One is your internal aspect of being self confident and having a good self worth, and other is being accepted by the society and valued by the society. And then comes the self actualization, which is essentially actualizing your potential of being born with a purpose in life. Should educational institutes garner creativity? Should they encourage creativity? The answer is yes. Creativity is especially important for educators. The growth of nation and the education of young people as responsible citizens is the primary goal of educators. One of the important tasks of higher educational institution is not only development of students' professional potential, but also to make him a better individual or to develop a comprehensive development of his personality. The professional potential and a well developed personality leads to optimal functioning through awareness of one's strengths and self esteem. It is important as each individual, society and nation must be in sync, must be in coordination to thrive together and prosper. Creativity is an emergent property, it does not come easy. It is an emergent property of a complex educational system which starts when you enter your kindergarten and when you come out as a postgraduate or as a graduate or even as a postdoctoral student, scholar. Improvement of educational process by creation of centers of intellect development, scientific and technical and artistic creativity is very necessary. Our national education policy is now focusing on this, and hence most of you are now going through a new adaptation of our curriculum, which is competency based dynamic curriculum, which you are now going through and you will go through the entire course of your BHMS. The educators, how do they enhance their creativity in curriculum as well? These are the two things that we will see in the next few slides. Using visual mnemonic devices through experimental learning rather than pure didactic classroom teaching, inspirational and instructional creativity, creating safe and sound creative space using emerging technologies, digital tools and softwares, setting a student through a two-way learning process rather than just one-way didactic lecturing and lecturing process. It is a two-way interactive learning process. A lot of brainstorming activities to take up new ideas, feedbacks, etc., and creating imaginative stories which can help people think creatively, encouraging curiosity and questioning and not suppressing the curiosity and questioning. And most important, encouraging reading habits. How do you create your own efficient space for creative thinking? First of all, get some good light. Light, the natural light stimulates creativity. Get some fresh air and be away from the noise. So, be in nature where you are exposed to natural light, have some good fresh air and be away from noise. Get experimental with your colors and space. It is not necessary that you are in the same place with the same colors all the time. Avoid monotonous approach. Reduce all your clutter, external clutter like your engagements, appointments, deadlines, and also your internal clutter. By that you mean your own focus, your own out of rapidly thinking mind, thoughts running about, some botherations, some things that have not gone well, some things that are hurting you, some things that are really making you anxious. Try and stay away from that for a moment. Stay away from distractions which can be like anything like crowds or any digital involvements. Be in solitude at times and note down your thought process. Know your time. We are all different and we have different habits as well. Some of us are night owls who work very well in the nights, and some of us have a morning physiology who work extremely well very early in the morning. So, it is important that you know yourself well as to what is your efficient time, when are you at the best of your work. Have a disciplined life, have proper meals, because this is where your physiological needs are going to get satisfied. Have a workout regime and have a proper sleep, because all this, knowingly or unknowingly, adds to your creative process, creativity and your creative thinking process very, very efficiently. So, these are some of the I would say suggestions. You can discover your own suggestions, and you can make your own self suggestions and experiment with yourself as to when you can be at the best when it comes to your own self, your own peace and creative thinking. Now, there is something happening inside us, and that is the alchemy of creativity. And this is something that I want, because you are going to going to be clinicians and physicians. So, you got to understand that if something is happening in our minds, there is also something happening in our body. So, there is a relationship between our hormones, neurotransmitters and creativity, which is complex and multifaceted. So, I am going to just touch upon this. You can read it in detail if you feel motivated enough. So, dopamine is linked to our motivation, reward and pleasure, and so is serotonin, which contributes to mood regulation and overall well-being. The norepinephrine is our flight and fright response transmitter. It facilitates or blocks both our creative as well as cognitive thinking and flexibility, because the more you are in fight and flight mode, the less flexible you are. Endorphins, which are natural painkillers, help in reducing the pain, and when you are not in pain, when you are not in distress, there is a possibility that you will become more and more creative. Cortisol, the stress hormone, some stress in certain situations are positive stimulators. They are things that will stimulate you to overcome that stress situations, and this can bring out the best in you and enhance your creative thinking. Oxytocin, the love or bonding hormone, is known to act creatively, especially when it comes to social creativity and cooperation, because it helps you think more from a loving perspective or a bonding perspective with your loved ones, with your community, with your family. And estrogen and testosterone, the gonadotropins, may impact the hormonal, these hormonal fluctuations may impact the menstrual cycle and can have impact on the creativity of the woman. So, in conclusion, creativity and creative thinking are termed as innovative out of box thinking to solve problems of real life. It involves connecting dots to create a sustainable solution to a problem. There are innovative thinkers and there are adaptive thinkers, as we saw in the slides. There are convergent thinking methods, there are divergent thinking processes and lateral thinking. Each method is required in different processes of creative thinking. Each has its own strength and each has its own weaknesses, and mind you, each of us will have a certain dominant system of thinking, and we will have to create the other alternative thinking methods by practice. There are two constructs to motivation theory when it comes to creative thinking. One is the deficiency creativity, where a need for acceptance, love, and when you are in a deprived scenario, you rise out of it to create the acceptance and the love and the esteem for yourself. And then there are these altruistic creative ways where you are actually creative for not only for self, for your environment, for people around you, for animals around you, for your nature around you, and you are benefiting the wholesome, you are trying to benefit everyone around you in your life. Most creative people are open minded, collaborative, they collaborate, they listen, they are emotionally and intellectually very proficient, they are not stuck, and they do not have a lot of intellectual sturdiness or rigidity. Creativity certainly brings to life joy and satisfaction, which is beyond materialistic gains, and it brings respect and honor to life, I think most of us desire for all these four requirements like joy, satisfaction, respect and honor. All of us have potential to be creative, no doubt, but our personal emotions, cognitive abilities, motivational factors, flexibility and analytical skills impact our creativity. So, it is important that we focus on ourselves and measure and see ourselves as to where are our blocks and work upon them. There are variations in creative opportunities due to socio-cultural, geographical and educational as well as economic diversity, and that cannot change. So, it is important that we sensitively understand these diversities and respect the creativities from different parts of the world. Creativity changes as per time. What could have been creativity 2 centuries ago is now a routine and mundane. What is creative now could be a thing of past a few years from now. So, creativity will change as per time. Actualizing personal potential to benefit self and society is an outcome of creative process, and hence I urge all of you to engage in the creative process. Core concepts in homeopathy like focus, health, like definition of health focuses on higher purpose of life, which is close to the idea of self actualization. The process of self discovery, which is outcome of creative engagement, has prime importance in homeopathic physician's life as an unprejudiced observer. Encompassing creativity as a core component in educational program is very essential for developing not only good professionals, but more importantly a better individual out of a student. These are some of extra readings that if you want to take up, I have given references as well. You can take up, read, follow the references and do your additional reading if you wish to. And I wish to thank you all for being with me, listening to this lecture very patiently, and I wish you all the best for your own creative journey, and believe me, trust your creativity and you will discover yourself. I wish to thank you all once again. Thank you.